Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming so early in the morning. Thank you. I just want a quick show of hands. How many have you seen us talk at either SUVR or AWE? Okay, cool. So some of this you might hear, but it's new stuff as well. All right, so we are Baobab Studios, and we're going to talk about storytelling's new frontier, which is what we believe VR to be. We believe our stuff is not really just a game or a film, it's something in between or something completely new. And I'm going to start off just saying about why VR for Baobab, and then Eric's going to take it over and talk about all the things that he's learned about going through creating Invasion, things like how to use cuts, sound, all those types of things. But he'll also tell you to ignore everything that we say because it's too early to be saying what you can and can't do. So actually, let me go backwards. So I'm CEO and co-founder of Maureen, and this is Eric Darnell, and he's our Chief Creative Officer. So how many of you guys consider yourselves athletes? Let's see, seriously? Come on, guys. How about singer-songwriters? Okay, one. How about astronauts? A few people, okay. But when you were 5 years old, you would have said yes to all the above. So the question is, what happened from when you were 5 to now that made you a little less idealistic? Maybe someone told you your sculpture didn't look quite right in art class, or you got a tiger mom like I did. But we believe that deep down inside, there's still a dreamer inside everyone. And we know it's true because it's the reason that we go to the movies to this day, is to experience characters and stories beyond those that we meet in our common lives. And we believe that animation does this better than live action, because live action is still constrained by reality versus animation is constrained only by the creativity within the director's head. And so animation to us is art in motion. It takes you to completely different worlds and makes the world feel so real that you think you could reach out and touch it. And the last two sentences that I just said, which is takes you to a different world and makes you believe it's real, is a definition of virtual reality, which is why we think animation and VR were made for each other. And so the mission for our company is to bring out your sense of wonder, inspire you to dream, and bring that 5-year-old in you back out again. And Eric's going to talk more about what he's learned about VR and why he's gone into VR and what storytelling means for VR.
Thank you. So I started messing around with computers in the early 80s. I think Fortran was the first thing that I did. Yeah, you know, and it's the 10 miles in the snow story, you know, of, you know, punching the cards and taking them to the computer and having the ladies take it, and then the next day you get your information back, printed out. It was just a very different time back then. This is a home computer. I just want to point out that, like, that's a recipe on there, and I just feel so sorry for the wife of the husband geek who saw this ad and thought this would be a great thing for his wife. It's like, you can put your recipes on it. Well, what's wrong with my cookbook? But that's really the state of the art back then. You know, telephones look like this, better as doorstops than phones, really. And I got more involved with computers as I went along. I was particularly inspired by the early work of Robert Abel, high fidelity. I just couldn't believe that these images were even possible to create. And so I wanted to become involved in this and brand new medium that nobody really knew what it was capable of doing. I went to PDI at the time, I think 1990. At that time was the oldest computer animation company in existence in the world. And I was lucky enough to get in the door there and work with a team of folks who were really interested in storytelling. And we were lucky to get the opportunity to do it when we partnered with DreamWorks. I think that was around 95 or 96. And from there, I was a director on Ants and a writer and director on the Madagascar films, which was 20 years of my life. And then a year and a half ago, when I finished The Penguins of Madagascar, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next, but I was looking for something different. And I met Maureen, and she handed me a VR headset, and I put it on for the very first time. And there was the future right before my eyes, so I knew what I wanted to do. And so I partnered with Maureen and Larry Cutler. We are the three co-founders of Baobab. Maureen was a Stanford grad. I think she was a triple major in psychology and computer science and art. She was very interested in doing something that involved animation, but the aforementioned Tiger Mom said, no, you'll be a starving artist. That's not good enough. And she ended up eventually going to Harvard Business School, which I'm grateful for because I couldn't be doing any of this stuff without all the skills that she brings to the table. And her career included a stint at eBay doing UI design and production management. Correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, Maureen. She worked at Pixar in production for a while, and then eventually found her place at Zynga, where she was there for 6 years, became VP of all new intellectual property, and oversaw hundreds of people developing, most significantly, the Farmville project, which was responsible for gazillions of dollars. But she still loved animation, and so nights and weekends she was a producer on The Dam Keeper, which was nominated for an Academy Award. And she recognized that you couldn't compete with the big players like Disney and DreamWorks and just start your own animation company. But when VR came along and the technological disruption that came with it, she realized that this was a time when if we move quick and powerfully, that we had an opportunity to make our mark in this brand new medium of virtual reality. Larry, in fact, went to Stanford as well and did his graduate thesis on virtual reality in the 90s, but he was wise enough to know that the time for VR wasn't there yet. He found his way to Pixar, where he was a technical director and character TD on Toy Story and Monsters, Inc., other projects. And then at DreamWorks, he advanced to a very high-level role overseeing all of the character tools that were being written and the character TD departments, and is responsible for developing the Academy Award-winning animation software that was just a real breakthrough, particularly with facial animation. He's also co-founder of the prestigious DigiPro conference, which occurs around SIGGRAPH. So I'm lucky to be with those guys, and hopefully the three of us are the three great legs of that milk stool that we need in order to be successful in this industry. But we've got these great advisors as well. Albie Ray Smith, co-founder of Pixar, David Inderman at Jaunt, Glenn Entis, one of the co-founders of PDI, Murray Soria, co-president at DreamWorks and producer of all the Madagascar films, Kevin Lin from Twitch, Glenn Keane, probably the greatest living animator today, and Chris Milk, who I know you guys are all aware of. And these are people that aren't just names on a billboard. They are involved with the company and help us every day. And so, as Maureen mentioned, we're focused on interactive storytelling in virtual reality and leveraging off of one of storytelling's great strengths, which is the capacity to elicit profound emotional experiences through the development of empathetic connections with the characters within the story. This is what storytelling has been doing for thousands of years. You know, storytelling has evolved with the human race. It's in our DNA. It really is what it means to be a human being. And it's one of the reasons why these classic forms of storytelling, like literature and movies and TV and plays, can elicit these really powerful emotions in all of us. You know, when you think of the things that we really love about the best movies and TVs and books, it is having this great story, telling it well with characters that we can fall in love with and that matter to us. And that's the very same thing that we want to try to do in virtual reality. So we're not really talking about games. We're talking about these powerful emotional journeys that we can help the audience travel down the path of which. So we tried to do this with our first piece, Invasion, which, well, why don't I just show you a little bit of it here, and for those that haven't seen it, it'll give you some context. This is an excerpt. So for those who, thanks. For those who haven't seen the full piece, the hawk deserves that. He tried to kill the bunny earlier in the story, so he deserves to be blown to bits. So the idea for this story came actually from watching the old classic War of the Worlds movie, and just kind of recognizing, it's obvious, but that the aliens, they're just monumental bumblers in that story, right? They have all this technology, all of this firepower, and they forget to account for microbes, the tiniest little living things on Earth, which end up doing them in, as I'm sure you guys all know. So I thought it'd be fun to take that idea, except in this case, let's make the aliens even bigger bumblers and make the little creatures that they forget to account for be these cute little white bunnies. And if you watch the piece on, for example, an Oculus headset, when you look down, you have the body of a little white bunny too, and it follows you around when you move around on the ice. If you squat, your bunny belly comes out, and it helps you understand why this other little bunny cares so much about you. And even though our focus was really on these aliens when we started out, and we spent a lot of time talking about their characters and so what was motivating them and how could we make them threatening and fun at the same time, and all of that stuff was important. But what we discovered was that the bunny was really the star of the show. I'd heard a lot about empathy in VR, and it just seemed like this word that was getting bandied about willy-nilly. And I guess I was just really skeptical. But when we started testing our piece with audiences and seeing how they react when this little bunny comes out of these rocks and hops up to them and looks you, the viewer, in the eye and acknowledges that you exist in her world, and the response that people had to this very simple, barely interactive moment in the story. But it was interactive. If you move around with the Oculus headset, the bunny will keep her eyes on you and follow you wherever you go. But the reaction from people was astonishing, to me at least. Some people would reach out and try to touch the bunny. Some would go, hi, wave at the bunny. And some people even started hopping around and trying to play with the bunny. There were a few people that started hopping around before the bunny did, and they were convinced that the bunny was hopping around because they did it first. And that's the next thing to build in, right? Build in that interactivity so that the bunny does hop if the viewer hops. But it just happens sort of magically for some people. And you don't do that when you go to a movie. People aren't hopping around in their seats or waving at Brad Pitt, going hi in the audience. So I realized very quickly that there's something special. There's something different about VR. And really, what is it? It's that it feels real, right? You're not sitting in a theater looking at a rectangle into a world that you can never be a part of with characters that have no idea that you exist. You are in that world, and the characters can respond to that fact, and it can make a difference. And this is completely different than what it means to go to a movie or watch a TV show or read a book, go to a play even. And then there was one moment in here that, in fact, Alvy Ray Smith brought up when he saw the piece for the first time. And I'll just play this to remind you, but the bunny runs and hides behind you and uses you as a bunny shield. And Alvy said, that was so, he kind of was just slack-jawed when he took the headset off. He goes, that was the weirdest experience I've ever had in my life. I looked at the bunny go behind me, but I wanted to see what the aliens are doing. I heard their antennas were charging up, and so I wanted to pay attention to what they were doing. But when I turned away from the bunny, I could feel her presence behind me. So I could almost feel her breath on the back of my neck. was probably our air conditioning, blowing on him in our office. But the fact that that bunny existed for him in a very real way, in physical space, for him, was mind-blowing. And there were other people that put the headset on and just said, I got to this moment and I wanted to do something to protect the bunny, and I didn't know what to do. And of course, we offered nothing more than just to stand there in this very early VR piece. But the fact that people were feeling this profoundly about this was inspiring to us, to say the least. And so, I kind of call this, just for fun, it's the power of the bunny. But it really is the power of the audience to suspend their disbelief. I'm going to read this to you. The power of the bunny is a metaphor for what I see as a broader potential of virtual reality, which is to give you the opportunity to believe that a character really exists and really matters, and then be able to act on that behalf. And you just can't do that in any other storytelling medium. If you look back at the movies, it's remarkable how you can just sit in that room and it can elicit these really powerful emotional responses, Make grown men cry. Make an entire audience gasp in unison. Lovers clutch each other's arms, and children instinctively cry out for their mothers. And that, in fact, happened to me when I was watching Bambi, and Bambi's mother is shot, and Bambi's running around in the woods going, "Mother, mother," and then some kid in the audience goes, "Mother?" Just broke your heart, Amazing, the power of the cinema. Through storytelling and virtual reality, I believe we'll be able to have the same kind of deep and profound emotional experiences that we have at the movies. And these experiences have the potential to be even more profound because of the fact that we're actually living them. And VR is not a movie, it's not a game, at least in the direction that we're taking it. There's no camera, there's no screen, there's no rectangle, there's no fourth wall to break. So when a character looks at you, they're just looking at you. You are in their world. And then, I think also, if you think about it, there's no mouse, there's no keyboard, there's no gamepad or joystick in this experience. It's just communication the way we communicate naturally. Eye contact is the main way that we connect with each other. Looking at each other's body language, etc. VR can allow us to communicate in the ways that we already instinctively communicate. So we don't have to think about which button to push to fire our gun, or we don't need to think about any kind of interface except our own physical body. Of course, VR has a little bit of a ways to go in that regard, but the potential is really profound. So I said this to me was the most significant discovery, or I suppose you could say confirmation of what VR storytelling can do. There were a number of other more practical things that we discovered along the way that I thought I could just tick off for you. Of course, VR is not the same as film. It is a brand new medium, and nobody knows anything, and don't believe anyone who says that they do. So you can throw out everything I say today, and I'll be fine with that. But I do and have come up against this all the time with people making statements about what you can or can't do in VR, or statements about what VR should be used to do. And I just think that this is not the time to put limits on this amazing medium with this unsurpassed potential, but it's the time to encourage exploration and discovery in whatever avenue people are interested in going down. So, cutting is something that we heard a lot you just couldn't do. Well, we do sort of soft cuts in Invasion, and they work just fine as far as I'm concerned. Teleportation is something, I think Bullet Train really pioneered that, and in the context of a sci-fi sort of story, that makes sense. But I've done many other experiences since then that have nothing to do with, whether or not teleportation is a technology that should be a part of that experience. But it does become a natural way to move around, and it essentially is cutting. It's allowing the viewer to sort of be the editor in a way, and move into things that are interesting to them, and move away from things that perhaps aren't. And so I think at least now, with the technology we have today, I think this is a really simple and powerful way to allow viewers to basically edit their experience. The other thing is, making the audience sick. We tested some camera movement stuff. And it's just too easy to make viewers uncomfortable. And I think you probably are all aware that, you know, at least on paper, if you accelerate the viewer's field of view, but their inner ear is saying, no, I'm just sitting here, that the brain gets these cross signals, and 99.999% of human evolution has sort of discovered that when that happens for a human being, it typically means they ate something poisonous. And so your body's reaction is to make you sick, make you nauseous, so you'll throw up the poison. That's simplification. There's probably many other things at work here. People have different susceptibilities to this kind of motion sickness, which is basically what it is. You know, some people can get on a boat and they're fine. Other people, it takes them days, or maybe they never actually get over their seasickness. There's actually a study done at the University of Wisconsin at Madison early this year, where they put people into pretty hairy, moving virtual reality experiences and timed how long it took them to take their headset off. And then they tested those same people's depth perception, and they found that the people who had the best depth perception, the best ability to judge the distance of objects that were moving towards them or away from them, were the ones most susceptible to motion sickness. Makes sense, they're more sensitive. So, you know, often you hear people saying, I never get sick, you know, come on, you wussies. But you can wear the badge of honor that you have great depth perception while you're throwing up into your toilet. So there's some advantage there. There are things that people are working on. At Mayo Clinic, they're doing some galvanic vestibular stimulation where they put little electrodes on your ear that sort of stimulate your inner ear to trick it into thinking that you are moving. And we've spoken to at least one person who's tried it, and she said that it actually worked. The problem was that she felt this little scraping sensation on the side of her neck, and she said it was just really uncomfortable. But there will be solutions for this, and when it happens, it's going to be a huge breakthrough for all of us to be able to really move that camera around in space without any worries about making people uncomfortable. One of the things that, you know, I was hearing, you know, a year ago or so is that, you know, all the sound should come from the environment, that any sound that's just existing inside of your head, as if you're wearing earbuds, would kick you out and would make you less immersed. So we actually tried that with Invasion. We broke the audio, the music up into 8 stems and placed them in a circle around the viewer. So the strings were here, and the wind instruments were there, and the percussion was there, and it was really cool. You know, you could turn your head, and you could hear, you know, the violins, you know, from the location that they were at. And it was completely distracting. Just kicked you out of the experience more than anything else. And so we actually did a stereo mix, and actually a very, very tight stereo mix. And perhaps it's just because we're all used to having scores in plays and films and TV shows, but for my money, I thought it worked just fine. And it was a very simple solution for us to have a score to play along with the story than it would have been to have to sort of put it in the environment somewhere. One of the things that we had been told is that because you were so immersed and things seemed so real, that the physics that you demonstrate inside a VR experience should be as real as possible. Well, I was concerned about this because, you know, animation is all about exaggeration. It's all about pushing things beyond reality. I remember years ago when we were talking with, at PDI, with Warner Brothers, I think, about doing a 3D Daffy Duck, and they wanted to use motion capture, which all the animators were just cringing because, you know, you're going to get this very fake, anthropomorphic, human, you know, contained motion, and it's not going to be anything like the kind of animation that we love to do, and the reason why we got into the business to begin with. And I was always grateful to Carl Rosendahl, who I think he's somewhere out there today, who said, well, we'd love to use motion capture, but we don't know a duck that can act. And so they allowed us to animate it by hand, and we were thrilled. A lot of talk about pacing and the need to allow the viewer time to settle into a world. And you know, I think this is going to be a real moving target as we move forward. You know, for a brand new audience member, somebody putting on the headset for the first time, Anything that you see in VR is going to, if it's of any quality at all, is going to blow you away, and you can sit there and watch the snow fall or the clouds roll by, and be satisfied. And so, giving people time to settle in, I suppose today makes sense. But as people get more savvy, and they're getting savvy very quickly, you're going to find that if you give people too much time, they're going to get bored. We all need stimulation. We need it to be coming at us. And so we're all going to be having, I think, to find the right balance of giving the audiences time and also keeping them interested. And of course, with VR, keeping the audience interest is critical, because you don't have control of the camera. You can't decide what they're going to look at. They need to be interested enough in what they're seeing to make those choices. And this leads me to this idea that a lot of people have asked me, how does it feel? You were a movie director, and now you've given up all this control. But I don't look at it that way. I think of it as I have different tools to help control the viewer's experience. When you're telling a story, in the classic traditional sense, structure is very important. Timing, rhythm, pacing, building to these emotional epiphanies. It's like a piece of music. You can't stop and necessarily wait for 5 minutes while a viewer solves a puzzle or kills zombies and then restart the story again and maintain that momentum. You really need to have the story flowing and moving forward at all times. So how do you do that when the viewer has the ability to go look at whatever they want to look at? And the way I think of it is that it's my job to inspire the viewer to look where I want them to look, when I want them to look there, even though they have the complete freedom of choice to look wherever they want. So it's their free choice to look exactly where I have inspired them to look. So you inspire the viewers to make that choice, and then you reward them for making that choice. There is actually something interesting. If you hear the call of a hawk and you look over there, there's a hawk and it's coming your way. It's even when I first got into this business, somebody said, if you're in an environment and you hear birds, you better damn well see a bird somewhere, right? But giving the audience those rewards for discovering and seeking out the things you want them to seek out is really important. And if you do this perfectly, you'll have 100% of the audience making the choices you want them to make 100% of the time. Perhaps an unattainable goal. I remember there was one woman when we were demoing, and the bunny went this way, and she went like this. And she did it twice. I said, VR is not for you. But there's always going to be those viewers. But I see that sort of as my challenge. If I can do that correctly, what that allows me to do is to take the viewer on a very defined and specific journey, and hopefully deliver the best possible experience for them. One way you can do this is think like a magician. And there's this magician saying that goes, if you want the audience to look at you, look at the audience. And when that bunny comes up from that hole in the rocks and looks at the audience, there's hardly anybody that looked away. It was just that compelling to them. And then if you want the audience to look at something else, then look at it. There's a sound off screen, the bunny turns and looks. Pretty much everybody that's looking turns and looks in the same direction as the bunny. Very simple things, but don't underestimate the power of that. Consider that a magician can stand up on a stage like this in front of hundreds or thousands of people, and nobody sees him take that card out of their sleeve because he's gone like that or something, and everybody is looking over there. It's a very powerful tool. I always look for opportunities to bring in what I know from my filmmaking background into VR. And you remember that ship coming over the treetops in the piece that we showed earlier. And because of my film background, I said, this is a great opportunity to really build some dramatic tension. We'll have that ship fly behind the stand of trees, and then we'll build up the music and we'll build up the sound of the ship. It'll be getting louder. It's obviously getting closer. The audience is going to be anticipating the reveal of the ship over the top of the trees, and they'll be riveted. And the sound is spatialized, so they'll know exactly where to look. And so after about 2 seconds of this build-up, essentially everybody in the audience, if the ship's coming from right over there, everybody in the audience after about 2 seconds starts to go, well, where is it? And most people were looking 180 degrees off axis. Even though they saw the ship go behind the tree, and they could hear the sound, and it's spatialized, and it's coming from right there, they started to not believe their own senses, and were 180 degrees off axis when the ship came over, and they missed that whole event. And so I had to take a lot of time out of that. And I'd take some time out, watch, then I'd get like 60% of the audience, and I'd take a little more time out, and then I'd get 80, and a little more time out, and I'd get most everybody. But that kind of experimentation is really critical, especially when you're trying to bring in what you know or what you think you know. If I had made the story that I had had in my head when we started Making Invasion, it would have been a failure. And it just underscored for me how different VR is than cinema. But one thing that's definitely true in film and certainly true in VR is that having great animated characters are always worth it. This is what storytelling is all about. It's about connecting with these characters that you are in the world with, that you understand not just what they're doing, but that you understand why they're doing it, that you understand what's happening inside of their head. And it's the thing that I talk with animators about every single day. We need to know, we need to see what that character is thinking. Before they take an action, we all decide to take that action. So we need to see that. And if you can deliver that to the audience and understand what's driving these characters from the inside out, that's what's going to give you the ability to really connect with them, understand them, and empathize with them. The Oculus is 90 frames per second, and we definitely wanted to take advantage of that. And so all the backgrounds and the falling snow, and certainly when you turn your head, it's refreshing at 90 frames a second. But when we did that with the animation, it just didn't look right. It looked too perfect or something. It's hard to describe, and maybe that's just the Luddite in me, but when we tried animating at 30 frames a second, it just had that charm that I love about character animation. And when I say 30 frames a second, we didn't interpolate the in-between frames so that we had 90 unique frames every second. We would hold on a frame or on a particular pose for 3 frames and then move on to the next pose. In fact, we don't want the computer to be making those choices for us anyway, because it just softens everything, and the animator loses the control and the crispness and the specificity that they're trying to deliver. And also, animating at 90 frames a second is 3 times as much of a pain in the ass. It's 60 more frames you have to be working with every second. So there's a practical reason as well. But we actually did it for a creative reason. The only thing that we did at 90 was when things are moving quickly. So like when that hawk swoops in, I guess we didn't see it today, but in the full piece, the hawk swoops in and tries to take the bunny. We bumped it up to 90 frames per second because otherwise you get strobing. Characters are moving too far between frames. And if we had motion blur working, then we could probably get away with 30. But we're generating frame every 70 or 11 milliseconds, I think. And we just don't have the firepower to calculate motion blur on top of that, at least not yet. Storyboards matter. For those of you that know, a lot of the discoveries of story and storytelling and characters are done through storyboarding, which, in the classical form is just drawings on paper, basically a comic book where you sketch out every beat and every moment. And it's just such a great way and a cheap way to make the discoveries that you need to make about story and character before you get into the expensive production. And my experience for the last 20 years is doing 80-minute feature films, and storyboarding was critical. And the reason why I put this up is because I thought, well, we're only making a 5-minute movie, so how important is storyboards? So we didn't do any, and it was a huge mistake because we had to make all of the discoveries, and often discoveries that required us to make significant changes while we were in the middle of production. So that was a bad idea that I had. So I'm back in the storyboard camp now. The next step for us is to design storyboards that actually work well in this new medium of VR. Because you can't just have pictures with locked off cameras and necessarily describe what the VR experience is going to be like. But we've got some top secret ideas that we're working on. Think twice before you kill the bunny. What does this mean? Well, as I said, there's an earlier moment in the story where the hawk comes in and tries to grab the bunny for lunch. And when we did our first test of this, our first little teaser, we didn't have time to animate the bunny for the whole thing. We didn't have time to have 2 aliens, so we just had 1 alien. And we realized we could actually really cut down significantly the animation time if we killed the bunny early. So the bunny hops up, looks at you, smiles, hops back, and kind of goes, "Let's play!" And then the hawk just swoops in and grabs it by the head and rips it off the ice and flies over the trees. And that's the end of the bunny. And we said, you know what, that's kind of funny. You know, the dark humor, let's just do that. Anyway, because it'll just be fun. And then we started showing it to people, and there was this one woman who took the headset off, and she said, you know, that was really fun, I really enjoyed it, but I would never show this to my 6-year-old daughter. And I asked her why, and she said, well, because you killed the bunny. And I said, oh, so she'd be sensitive to that, huh? And she said, well, you know, I look at it this way. If we were in a movie theater and you killed the bunny, the adults would laugh at the dark humor, and that would sort of lighten the load a little bit. And my daughter could turn to me and look up and say, Mommy, what happened to the bunny? And I could tell her whatever I thought she needed to hear. But if she was going to have this VR headset on, she's all by herself out on the ice, and there's no one to turn to. And I think it would be a devastating experience for her. And I thought that was a really insightful comment, and really points, yet again, to the significant differences between cinema and VR. And it was part of the reason we made the decision to keep the bunny alive. And thank God we did, because as I said, much to our surprise, people just fell in love with Chloe, which is the bunny's name. Nobody knows that, but my niece begged me to call it after her. So Chloe it is. Sita is good. I think James Cameron coined this. Sita is crap in the air. We have snow falling all around, so all of that provides instant depth cues and really gives you a sense of the volume of the space that you're in. So a lot of people talk about virtual reality as an empathy engine. And as I said, I was skeptical about it before, but now I really believe in that. But I want to take it a step further, recognizing that we can create this empathy in the audience. Can we then inspire them to act upon that empathy? And acting on empathy is compassion. And so if we can have audiences making choices and having agency that's driven by the empathy that they're feeling, basically taking compassionate actions on other characters' behalf, then I think we have an opportunity to maintain this powerful emotional thread that we're all used to in other traditional storytelling mediums, and allow the viewer to be a part of the story at the same time. And it's because they're participating not in the goal to win or to get to the next level or to go from point A to point B, but because they are invested in the other characters around them and the emotional journey that the characters, i.e. the story, is trying to take them on. And so for us, at the end of the day, virtual reality is amazing, it's cool, there are so many things that you can do in it, but it's never leading for us. For us, the most important thing about storytelling in VR is storytelling. If you don't have a great story, if you don't have characters that people can fall in love with, all you have is maybe a gee whiz moment or a pretty picture. And while audiences will respond to that today, we're all pretty smart, and that stuff is going to kind of fall by the wayside. And then we're going to want some meat on the bones. We're going to want some depth. And that's what we're trying to at least start doing at Baobab. So the future, well, there's other people here at the conference that are talking about this, but I do think it's kind of funny that I think the original Star Trek takes place, somebody probably knows better than I do, it takes place in 2227 or 2226 or something like that. And it still took them another generation to have the holodeck. Well, I think we will have something akin to that in my lifetime. so we can all look forward to that. In the meantime, we're going to be wearing these bricks on our head and being, wired to computers and stuff, but it will change. Hey, wait, I went backwards. So there's some of the very first folks that made Baobab happen, and the reason why we wanted to put this image up is that aside from me and Maureen and Maciek, the tall Polish guy on the right, he's an animator who, he says, I said, so where are you with the animation? He goes, I'm almost done. All I'm going to do now is just Polish, Polish, Polish. We had getting in trouble about that. But the four guys in the middle are really veterans of cinema. Rob Koo, probably one of the greatest living story artists. Glenn Entis, one of our advisors who founded PDI back with Carl and Richard way back in the good old days. Wait, was it 1980? Yeah, 1980. And then Alvy Ray Smith, founder of Pixar. Glenn Keane, greatest living animator, was really responsible in a large part for the Renaissance at Disney, back with Little Mermaid and everything that followed. And these guys are a part of what we're doing because I think they see in us and in this brand new industry the incredible potential that they saw in computer animation and traditional animation back in the 80s. And so we couldn't be luckier than to have these guys sort of with us and leverage off of what they learned on their journey and have them along with us on the ride of ours. So this is our next piece. It actually just premiered in a sneak peek form on the Gear VR yesterday, and I believe it's showing somewhere around here. Maureen, is in the theater. Do we have that to show? It's coming. Okay. So here's a little look at what's coming next. All right, so check it out on the Gear VR or in the theater here. And it's just the beginning. There'll be certainly more to come. And I can tell you that, the two aliens, their name is Mac and Cheese. And then we introduced this new little character, and we didn't know what to call him. And then one guy in our company went to the grocery store to pick up some lunch, and on the chalkboard outside, they had their lunch special at Nob Hill, which was mac and cheese with peas. So Peas is now the name of their little robot companion. So